What's up YouTube, I'm Mike, and today I'm talking about the potential anti-estrogen effects of Cialis or Tadalafil. So one of my commenters, viewers on one of my previous videos, Devourer of Villages, commented that he had crashed his estrogen on 9 milligrams of Tadalafil and 50 milligrams of zinc. So I was a bit skeptical about this for a number of reasons. I'd never heard of Cialis having any type of anti-estrogenic effects, and so I decided to do some research after his comment, and thank you very much for viewing and for that comment, and found a number of studies that show, or that seem to show, that the use of Tadalafil will changes the ratio of testosterone to estrogen in the body. I haven't found anywhere that says specifically that Tadalafil is an aromatase inhibitor. But regardless, I'm going to read you some of these studies and I'm going to put them up on the screen as well, so that you can go through them yourselves and see what you think. This first study is called Tadalafil modulates aromatase activity and androgen receptor expression in a human osteoblastic cell in vitro model. So the abstract says phosphodiesterase type 5 or PDE5I inhibitors. Tadalafil administration in men with erectile dysfunction is associated with increased testosterone to estradiol, leading to hypothesize a potential increased effect of androgen action on target tissues. We aim to characterize in a cellular model system in vitro the potential modulation of aromatase and sex steroid hormone receptors upon exposure to Tadalafil. So they took human osteoblast-like cells, which is going to be SAOS2, were chosen as an in vitro model system. The osteoblasts are targets of steroid hormones. The cells were tested for viability using Tadalafil exposure, which increased cell proliferation. Then the cells were treated with and without TAD for several times to evaluate potential modulation in PDE5, aromatase, androgen receptor, and estrogen receptor expression. What they found for this study was that the osteoblasts express significant levels of both PDE5 and mRNA protein. Exposure of cells to increasing concentrations of Tadalafil decreased PDE5, mRNA, and protein expression. Also, Tadalafil inhibited aromatase, mRNA, and protein expression, leading to an increase in testosterone levels in the supernatants. Interestingly, Tadalafil increased total androgen receptor, mRNA, and protein expression, and decreased estrogen receptor with an increased ratio of AR to ER, suggesting preferential androgenic versus estrogenic pathway activation. So a lot of science there. Again, it says that there is a modulation of aromatase. So I'm not a scientist. I don't know if it's fair to say that makes it aromatase inhibitor, but the conclusion is that for the first time, Tadalafil, it's shown that Tadalafil decreases aromatase expression and increases androgen receptor protein expression in these osteoblast cells. So from this particular study, it seems that to be indicating that Tadalafil has some rather performance enhancing effects. You're going to get a higher testosterone level, a lower estrogen level, and you're also going to signal increased protein synthesis in the mRNA at the androgen receptor. So again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not sure that that's one-to-one comparison to what steroids do in the way that they upregulate protein synthesis. But from this particular study, it seems clear that at the very least you have some type of modulation of aromatase. So the next study is called, if I can bring it up, Correcting Imbalance of Sex Hormones by a Phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitor Improves Copulatory Dysfunction in Male Rats with Type 2 Diabetes. So In this study, they took sexual dysfunction is a common complication in men with type 2 diabetes and is often refractory to treatment. This study investigates the long-term influence of phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitor Tadalafil on the level of sex hormones and sexual function in the Otsuka, Long Evans, Takashima fatty rats. So apparently these fatty rats are prone to diabetes. In fact, it says that the rats, as an animal model of spontaneous type 2 diabetes, I don't know why that is, but regardless, they took these rats at 36 weeks of age, and they tested them with Tadalafil 100 UGs per kilogram per day for 12 weeks. They took serum levels of testosterone, free testosterone, estradiol, and luteinizing hormone, which has some other potential correlations. And they looked at pro-inflammatory cytokines were compared amongst all the groups. So they also examined the copulatory function by matching each rat to an estrus female. After completion of the experiment, total fat mass in the abdomen was measured. Okay, so you got these fatty rats, and they're type 2 diabetics, and so their libido is all fucked up, and they put them in a cage with a female rat in heat, and then they gave them Tadalafil to see what would happen. So you gotta love this study. The results were that the testosterone levels were significantly lower in the O-let-F versus let-O rats at 36 weeks. So the rats that had diabetes had significantly lower testosterone levels than the non-diabetic rats. And after 12 weeks of Tadalafil treatment, levels of testosterone were significantly increased in both the O-let-F Tadalafil and let-O Tadalafil groups. So independent of whether the rats had type 2 diabetes, the Tadalafil significantly increased their testosterone level. Tadalafil decreased estradiol levels in both groups. Furthermore, Tadalafil increased serum luteinizing hormone with a reduction of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Total fat mass was significantly lower in the O-let-F Tadalafil group versus the O-let-F non-Tadalafil group. A significant suppression of copulatory behavior, that is elongation of intromission latency, was found in the diabetic rats. So what that's saying is that they were not fucking as much. There was a much greater amount of time in between copulations in the diabetic rats. However, the Tadalafil treatment for 12 weeks shortened the intromission latency. So there you have it, another study, unfortunately, with rats and not with men, showing that the use of Tadalafil not only increases testosterone, it decreases estrogen or estradiol, and it improves luteinizing hormone. So you would think that with the rise in luteinizing hormone, the use of the Tadalafil would support testicular function, potentially offsetting the negative effect that, for example, testosterone replacement therapy has on your HPTA. So you start using exogenous testosterone, you crush your testicles stop producing their own, but in the presence of luteinizing hormone, they would go back to work. Now, I don't know that this works at a sufficient rate. What is that sound in my house? Hopefully you can't hear that pipe running. I guess my wife's taking a shower. So I don't know that this is enough luteinizing hormone to kickstart the testicles, but what we see again in this study is that Tadalafil seems to be for a hell of a lot more than sex. Like, we have a potentially very performance-enhancing drug if we can increase testosterone levels, lower estrogen, improve luteinizing hormone. Obviously, there's going to be some positive effects from that. The last study that I found here is titled Tadalafil improves lean mass and endothelial function in non-obese men with mild ED in vivo and in vitro characterization. So finally we have an actual study on humans. The abstract says that the PED5 inhibitor administration in diabetic men with erectile dysfunction is associated with reduced waist circumference. We evaluated potential effects of daily Tadalafil administration on body composition and investigated its possible mechanisms of action in the C2-C12 skeletal muscles in vitro. So they took 43 men on a stable caloric intake, complaining of mild ED and or low urinary tract symptoms, were randomly assigned to receive either Tadalafil at 5 milligrams daily or 20 milligrams on demand for 2 months. Primary outcomes were variations of body composition measured by dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. Secondary outcomes were ED, LUTS questionnaire scores along with hormone, testosterone, estradiol, insulin, and endothelial function. The results were that there was an increased abdominal lean mass that returned to baseline after 2 months of withdrawal in the OAD-TAD, which is the on-demand Tadalafil group. LUTS scores were improved in the on-demand Tadalafil group, while ED scores improved in both groups. We found significant improvements in the endothelial function that directly correlate with serum insulin and inversely correlated with estradiol levels. Even when corrected for potential confounders, exposure of C2, C12 cells upon increasing Tadalafil concentrations increased total androgen receptor mRNA and protein expression, as well as myogenin protein expression after 24 and 72 hours, respectively. So the conclusion was that daily Tadalafil improved lean mass content in non-obese men, probably via enhanced insulin secretion, estradiol reduction, and improvement in endothelial function in vivo. The in vitro increased myogenin and androgen receptor protein expression in skeletal muscles suggests translational action of phosphodiesterase type 5 on this receptor. So there you have it. 3 different studies, one I believe in men and human males, some rat studies where the same conclusion is drawn, that the use of Tadalafil will increase your testosterone level, will decrease your estrogen levels, will improve luteinizing hormone, and also seems to upregulate protein expression at the androgen receptor. So across the board, we're talking about a very potentially anabolism driving drug that also just happens to have the effect of making you a rock star in bed. So if that's not a reason to go out and find this stuff, I don't know what is. I will tell you that if you do try Cialis, be very careful with your dose before, when you get started. So I have Cialis, I was prescribed it, 20 milligram pills, but was advised to start much lower. I can't remember if I started at 5 or 10. I think I started at 10. Crushing headaches and massive heartburn. Apparently Tadalafil it reduces the sphincter in your stomach, as well as the control. It's what allows your penis to become engorged. And so it also acts on, I think it's called sphincter, the upper part of your stomach. And so it relaxes that, and you can get heartburn as stomach gases and acid go up the esophagus. And so for one, at that 5 milligram dose or 10 milligram dose, I can't remember now, I had just crushing, miserable headaches and massive heartburn. I have dialed my Cialis dose all the way down to 2.5 milligrams, I think. I'm having to cut the pills. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm crushing them and then weighing them out, which is incredibly tedious. I think I'm really down to trying to get 12 doses out of a 20 milligram pill, so it's even less than 2 milligrams. And that works phenomenally for me. I don't really need it. Honestly, I'm already on testosterone replacement therapy, so really it's just an extra. But anything over that 2 milligram dose, and I have miserable side effects. So I don't know how anybody can take 20. Devourer of Villages, the viewer who commented, who spawned this entire video, of course said he was taking 9 milligrams. Good for you. I don't know what's going on with my body, but if you ever try Cialis, be very careful because, as I've said, it can be pretty ugly. So hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully this will really start a conversation about this drug. I looked on YouTube very briefly before I made this video to see if anybody else had talked about it. Vigorous Steve made a video about Cialis, and he talked about a number of its effects, like lowering blood pressure, pumps and vascularity. I don't recall him mentioning anything about estrogen. Maybe he did. I didn't rewatch the video. So again, I'm an amateur to this. Maybe we can get somebody else in the community that knows a lot more about these drugs and how they interact with the body to talk about whether or not you could use Cialis as an effective aromatase inhibitor while you are either on, you know, a cycle or when you're on hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy. Would Cialis do the job well enough to keep you off of Arimidex? Something to think about. So hopefully you guys got something out of this. I appreciate all the new subscribers again. Please like, thumb up the video, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.